What if the most important words you ever wrote never reached the person they were meant for? He kept it for over a decade, a single envelope, sealed shut, carrying the confession of a lifetime. She was the one person who changed everything for him. And yet, she never knew. He had the chance to tell her, more than once, but every time, something stopped him. This is not just a love story. It's a story about timing, and how sometimes the moment you need most passes before you even realize it was there. By the end, you'll be asking yourself, if it were you, would you have sent the letter? The rain had been falling for hours, painting New York in shades of gray. Inside a small coffee shop on 7th Avenue, the warm glow of dim lights made the outside world feel distant, almost unreal. People came and went, shaking off their umbrellas, chatting over steaming cups. But in the far corner near the window sat a man who seemed untouched by the hum of life around him. He was in his late 30s now, dressed in a simple black coat, hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold. His eyes were fixed on the blurred world outside, yet it was clear he wasn't really seeing the street at all. He was somewhere else, trapped in a memory. On the table in front of him lay a folded, yellowed envelope. It was worn at the edges, creased as though it had been opened and closed countless times. The handwriting on the front was delicate, almost hesitant. A woman's name. He traced the letters with his thumb, his breath catching slightly as if touching her name was like touching her. The waitress passed by and paused. "Sir, would you like a refill?" He looked up at her, startled, as if he had been pulled back from another time. No, thank you." His voice was soft, almost breaking. When she left, his gaze returned to the envelope. It wasn't a letter he had received. It was a letter he had written, years ago, and he had never sent it. Outside, a couple ran across the street laughing in the rain. For a moment, his lips curved into the faintest smile, but it faded quickly. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and let the past pull him under. The first time he saw her, it was nothing like he had imagined love would be. Had been spring, the kind of afternoon when the air feels warmer than the sunlight itself. He had been 22, fresh out of college, working his first real job at a small publishing firm in Manhattan. The city had felt endless back then, a giant puzzle he was learning to solve. He met her in the elevator. She stepped in at the 12th floor, wearing a pale blue dress and holding a leather-bound notebook. Her hair was caught in the soft breeze from the hallway, and for a moment he was so distracted that he forgot to press his floor button. She looked up at him and smiled politely. 14? She asked, reaching for the button. Yeah, thanks," he replied, his voice betraying the sudden tightness in his chest. It was such a small thing, two strangers sharing an elevator ride. But something about her stayed in his mind all day. Maybe it was the way she tapped her fingers lightly on the notebook, or how her eyes seemed to carry the calm of someone who wasn't rushing through life. Over the next few weeks, he saw her in passing. In the lobby, at the coffee machine, once in the park across the street. Each time they exchanged a few words. Each time the air seemed different when she was near. He learned her name, Emily. She worked in the design department. One rainy afternoon, as they both waited for the elevator, she said something that stayed with him forever. "Do you ever feel like the city hides people from each other?" she asked. He looked at her, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "Millions of us, all packed together, yet the ones we're meant to meet, we almost never do." The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. He followed, and without knowing why, he felt like he was meant to meet her. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. By now they had fallen into a rhythm, little conversations in the hallway, smiles exchanged in the cafeteria, the occasional shared walk to the subway. He noticed everything about her, the way she cradled her coffee cup with both hands before taking the first sip, the way she tilted her head slightly when she was curious about something, the way her laugh wasn't loud, but lingered in the air like a melody. He never told her outright how he felt, but he didn't need to. The small things spoke for him, remembering her favorite tea, offering his umbrella on a rainy evening, holding the elevator when he saw her rushing. One winter afternoon, when the first snow had dusted the streets, they found themselves alone in the office after hours. She was working on a design project, and he was finishing edits for a manuscript. "Do you ever wonder how different things would be if we could just say everything we feel?" she asked suddenly, eyes still on her work. He looked at her, caught off guard. "I think about it more than I should," he admitted. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had gone quiet, like they were the only two people left in the city. But then she smiled faintly, closed her notebook and said, "Well, maybe some things are better left unsaid." He didn't agree. Not really, but he nodded anyway. Later that night, lying in bed, he thought about her words. Some things are better left unsaid. He couldn't help but wonder, was she talking about him? It was late summer when he finally decided to write it. The letter. It wasn't planned. One night, after walking her home from a late shift, he returned to his apartment with his chest aching from all the words he'd never spoken. He sat at his desk, took out a sheet of paper, and began. At first, the words came slow, hesitant, but then they poured out of him like water breaking through a dam. He wrote about the first time he saw her in the elevator, how he remembered the color of her dress and the way she had smiled without meaning to. He wrote about the conversations that had stayed with him, about how the city felt different when she was near. He told her, in ink, everything he could never say out loud. By the time he finished, the sun was rising. He read the letter twice, then folded it carefully, slid it into an envelope, and wrote her name on the front in neat handwriting. He planned to give it to her the next day, but the next day she wasn't there, and neither was she the day after. For the first time since they'd met, an entire week passed without seeing her. At first, he thought maybe she was on vacation, but when he asked around the office, no one seemed to know. The design department had been unusually quiet. Her desk sat empty, a thin layer of dust settling on the corner where she kept her mug. Something felt wrong. On the 8th day, he decided to call her. Her number went straight to voicemail. He left a message, casual, not wanting to sound worried, but deep down worry had already rooted itself in his chest. The next morning, he spotted one of her close friends from work in the lobby. "Hey, have you heard from Emily?" he asked. She hesitated, then sighed. "You didn't hear? She had to move back to Boston. Family emergency. Left kind of suddenly." The words hit him harder than he expected. Boston. That was 4 hours away. 4 hours of all the things he'd never said. He went back to his desk, pulled open the top drawer, and there it was, the letter. Still sealed, still unsent. For 2 days, he carried it in his coat pocket, telling himself he'd mail it. But every time he reached for the envelope, doubt stopped him. What if she didn't feel the same? What if the letter only made things harder for her? On the 3rd night, he tucked it back into his desk drawer. And there it stayed. The seasons changed. Years passed. He got promoted, moved to a different apartment, made new friends, and lost some old ones. The city itself seemed to change faces, but in his mind, she stayed the same, standing in that elevator, smiling in that pale blue dress. Sometimes he would walk past places they had been together, the coffee shop near the office, the park bench where she once sketched a skyline, and he'd feel the same quiet ache. Once, he even went to Boston for a work trip. For an entire evening, he sat in his hotel room staring at her name in his phone contacts, finger hovering over the call button. But he never pressed it. And the letter? It moved with him. From drawer to drawer, from apartment to apartment. Every few months, he'd find it again, open it, read it, and fold it back carefully. The words still felt true, maybe truer than ever, but he always put it away. He told himself that life had moved on, that maybe she was married now, maybe she had children, that the letter would only disturb whatever peace she had found. Still, sometimes, late at night, he wondered what might have happened if he had sent it. And every time, the thought left him staring at the ceiling, wide awake. It was a cold November morning when he saw her again. He was sitting by the window of a small cafe downtown, flipping through notes for a meeting, when a familiar laugh drifted through the hum of voices. He froze. Slowly, he turned his head. There she was, Emily. Her hair a little shorter, a few new lines near her eyes, but the same warm smile. She was standing at the counter ordering coffee, a scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. For a moment, he thought about not saying anything, maybe just watching her walk out the door like she'd walked out of his life all those years ago. But then, before he could think, he was already on his feet. Emily? She turned, and for a second her expression was blank, searching. Then her face lit up. Oh my God, Daniel. They sat together, talking for nearly an hour. She told him about Boston, about taking care of her father until he passed, about her new job in Chicago. She laughed the same way she used to, and he found himself memorizing every detail all over again. But there was something in her eyes, a softness, a question she never asked. When she finally stood to leave, the old ache returned. The moment was slipping away again. He reached into his coat pocket, fingers brushing against the worn envelope he'd carried for more than a decade. She noticed his hesitation. What is it? She asked. For a heartbeat, the world felt utterly still. This was it. His last chance. He opened his mouth and closed it again. Nothing, he said with a small smile. Just take care of yourself. She smiled back, squeezed his hand, and walked out into the cold, disappearing into the crowd. He sat there for a long time, the letter heavy in his pocket. He never saw her again. That night, back at his apartment, he took the letter from his coat, held it under the warm glow of the lamp, and without opening it, set it gently inside a drawer. Some things, he finally understood, are meant to remain unsent.